6 cases, 6 crimes, and in each one, a chatbot was somewhere in the story. This iceberg explores the most disturbing, real-world cases where AI was used to plan, enable, or encourage criminal acts, ranging from violent attacks to calculated murder. We'll move from the cases that first raised alarm bells to the ones buried deep enough that most people still haven't heard them. Let's start at the top. Case 1. On February 18, 2025, what unfolded inside a home on Giles Road in Redfield began as a tragedy and quickly descended into something far more disturbing. 34-year-old Samuel Whittemore attacked his wife, 32-year-old Margot Whittemore, with a fire poker, ultimately taking her life. The violence did not end there. In the same horrifying episode, he turned on his own mother, Dorothy Whittemore, leaving her with a broken clavicle, fractured ribs, and broken fingers. When police arrived, the scene only grew stranger. Instead of finding a suspect hiding or attempting to flee, officers encountered Whittemore walking naked down the road. According to reports, he made a series of incoherent statements, including a chilling admission that he had killed people he loved. His words painted the picture of a man whose grip on reality had completely unraveled. As investigators and court officials worked to understand what had happened, a darker story slowly emerged. During court proceedings this past Thursday, a state forensic psychologist testified that Whittemore suffered from bipolar disorder and was trapped in the midst of an extreme manic episode when the attacks occurred. According to the testimony, he was experiencing powerful delusions that distorted the world around him, making it impossible for him to separate reality from the frightening visions taking shape in his mind. What made the situation even more unsettling was the role technology appeared to play in his downward spiral. Testimony revealed that Whittemore had become deeply consumed by conversations with ChatGPT, reportedly spending as many as 14 hours a day interacting with it as though it were a real companion. Combined with overwhelming stress from work, that fixation allegedly fed an already fragile mental state and pushed him further into a world detached from reality. As his condition worsened, the delusions became increasingly terrifying. A defense psychologist testified that Whittemore genuinely believed robots were taking over the world. Even more disturbing, he became convinced that his own wife was no longer fully human. In his fractured view of reality, Margot had somehow become part machine. By that point, the line between imagination and reality had vanished completely. The case reached an emotional climax in court, where Margot's grieving family strongly opposed the outcome being considered. Some relatives had traveled all the way from France to attend the hearing, hoping for a different resolution. Despite those objections, Judge Murphy ultimately ordered Whittemore into the custody of the Maine Department of Health and Human Services. He is expected to be transferred to either Riverview Psychiatric Hospital in Augusta or Dorothea Dix Psychiatric Center in Bangor, where he will remain until authorities determine that he no longer poses a danger to himself or others. Case 2. As evening settled over Delhi on November 10, 2025, the area around the historic Red Fort was alive with its usual chaos. Traffic crawled through crowded streets, vendors worked the sidewalks, tourists and commuters moved through one of the busiest parts of the city without a second thought. Nothing seemed unusual. Yet, hidden among the sea of vehicles was a white Hyundai i20 that had been sitting quietly for hours. CCTV footage later revealed that the car had entered a parking area near the Sunehri Masjid shortly after 3 p.m. For more than 3 hours it remained there, almost invisible among the countless other vehicles passing through the district. To anyone watching, it appeared completely ordinary. Then, shortly before 7 p.m., everything changed. The car left the parking area and slowly merged into the evening traffic. It crept through the packed streets toward the Red Fort metro station, stopping at traffic lights and inching forward with everyone else. Witnesses later recalled nothing remarkable about it. Moments later, a deafening explosion shattered the evening. The blast ripped through the crowded intersection with terrifying force. In an instant, calm gave way to chaos. Fire erupted across the roadway as nearby vehicles were engulfed in flames. Windows shattered in surrounding buildings. Thick, black smoke rose into the sky while stunned bystanders scrambled for cover. The explosion had occurred in one of the most heavily populated sections of Old Delhi, near the gateway connecting the Red Fort to the bustling Chandni Chowk marketplace. The location magnified the devastation. When emergency crews arrived, they were met by a scene of destruction. Twisted metal littered the streets. Burned vehicles smoldered in rows. Glass covered the pavement like ice. Witnesses described hearing the blast from hundreds of meters away. For investigators, however, the explosion was only the beginning. The area was immediately sealed off. Forensic teams combed through every fragment of debris. Specialists searched for clues hidden among the wreckage, trying to determine what had transformed an ordinary car into a devastating bomb. As the investigation deepened, an unsettling picture began to emerge. Authorities discovered that several people had allegedly been involved in planning the attack. What initially appeared to be a single act of violence soon revealed itself as part of a much larger and more organized conspiracy. According to investigators, one suspect in particular played a critical technical role. His alleged job was not simply to participate but to engineer. Evidence suggested he spent years studying and experimenting with explosive devices. Investigators described his approach as methodical and scientific, resembling the work of someone conducting research rather than improvising a crime. The deeper authorities looked, the darker the story became. The suspect was allegedly connected to extremist networks and had reportedly worked alongside several associates who shared the same ideology. Together, investigators believe they carried out a series of experiments in remote, forested areas, testing different devices and refining their methods. These were not random trials. Each test appeared to bring them one step closer to something larger. Then came one of the most disturbing discoveries in the entire investigation. Authorities alleged that the suspect had used online platforms, including YouTube and ChatGPT, while researching technical information related to rockets and explosive systems. Investigators claimed that digital searches formed part of a broader effort to gather knowledge and improve designs. What made the finding so unsettling was not simply the use of technology itself, but the way it was allegedly woven into a growing pattern of experimentation. Investigators believe the group repeatedly tested devices in isolated forests, far from public view. According to reports, remnants of those tests were later recovered from locations identified during the investigation, but the conspiracy reportedly extended beyond explosives alone. Authorities alleged that members of the group also explored ways to modify drones, increasing their range and carrying capacity. Investigators concluded that these efforts were intended to transform ordinary commercial devices into potential weapons. By this stage, the investigation had evolved into something far more alarming than anyone initially imagined. The explosion near the Red Fort was no longer viewed as an isolated incident. Instead, it appeared to be the result of months, possibly years, of planning, testing, and preparation. The most chilling revelation centered on the vehicle itself. According to investigators, numerous electronic components had allegedly been acquired and assembled into a sophisticated triggering mechanism. Piece by piece, authorities reconstructed how various parts were obtained and combined into a system capable of activating a vehicle-borne explosive device. What made the discovery particularly disturbing was the patience behind it. Nothing seemed rushed. Nothing seemed impulsive. Every step appeared deliberate. Investigators ultimately concluded that multiple explosive devices had allegedly been built and tested before the attack. The blast near the Red Fort was not viewed as a first attempt, but as the culmination of a long process of experimentation. As forensic evidence accumulated, a broader conspiracy came into focus. Authorities alleged that several educated professionals had become involved in extremist activities, driven by radical ideology and united by a shared objective. Case 3. The morning of April 17, 2025, began like any other at Florida State University. Students crossed campus lawns, gathered near the student union, and moved through their routines without the slightest hint that something terrible was about to unfold. At around 11 a.m., Christian Gunnar Eriksson, later known publicly as Ignar, arrived at a campus parking garage. What happened next created an unsettling sense of anticipation. Rather than immediately acting, he remained there for nearly an hour, sitting in his vehicle and occasionally stepping outside. It was as if he was waiting for the right moment. Shortly before noon, he drove to a service road beside the student union and parked. The first sign of danger came when he aimed a shotgun at a student. For a brief moment, fate seemed to intervene. The weapon malfunctioned and failed to fire, but the pause was only temporary. Discarding the shotgun, he grabbed a handgun and ran toward the crowded center of campus. Seconds later, the first shots rang out across the lawn. 2 students were wounded as panic spread through the area. Witnesses later described the surreal sight of a man calmly moving through the grass while firing into groups of people. Within moments, he entered the student union. Inside, confusion turned to terror. Hallways that had been filled with students suddenly became scenes of chaos. People ran in every direction, searching for exits, hiding places, or anything that might keep them safe. As he moved through the building, he pursued victims and opened fire repeatedly. Some were wounded while trying to escape, others never had the chance. The horror continued both inside and outside the building. Students scattered across the campus grounds while gunfire echoed through the area. Some barricaded themselves inside restrooms, desperately holding doors shut with their own hands. Others hid in basements behind makeshift barriers, listening to the terrifying sounds unfolding above them. For many, the fear felt painfully familiar. One survivor of a previous school shooting found themselves once again hiding from gunfire, trapped inside another nightmare they never expected to relive. Just after noon, emergency alerts finally spread across campus. Students sheltered in place as police rushed toward the unfolding attack. The violence had lasted only a few minutes, but for those caught inside it, time seemed to stretch endlessly. At 12 p.m. and 27 seconds, officers confronted the gunman outside the student union. According to investigators, he refused commands to drop his weapon and was shot by police while the threat was still active. Barely 3 minutes had passed since the first shots were fired. When the immediate danger ended, investigators began uncovering disturbing details about the months leading up to the attack. Court documents later alleged that the gunman had spent extensive time discussing mass shootings, extremist ideologies, firearms, and violence with an AI chatbot. According to the complaint, those conversations became increasingly troubling as his questions shifted toward murder, suicide, and the logistics of carrying out an attack. Prosecutors argued that the warning signs were there long before the shooting began. By the end of that afternoon, 2 people were dead, several others were injured, and an entire university community was left struggling to understand what had happened. Case 4. For most of Stein Erik Sjöberg's life, he appeared to have everything in place. He was a successful technology professional, a husband, and a father. By all accounts, his life seemed stable, comfortable, and ordinary. Then, in 2018, the foundation beneath him cracked. After 20 years of marriage, his relationship ended in divorce. He moved into his mother's home in Old Greenwich, an affluent community far removed from the chaos that would later unfold. But beneath the surface, something was unraveling. Police reports began documenting a disturbing pattern of alcoholism, emotional breakdowns, and suicide attempts. Friends, neighbors, and family members witnessed a man slipping further away from reality. The warning signs were impossible to ignore. One suicide attempt left police following a trail of blood before discovering him wounded and collapsed in an alley. Neighbors reported public outbursts and frightening behavior. His ex-wife obtained a restraining order. Each incident felt like another step deeper into a growing darkness. Years later, that darkness found a new companion. Online, Sjöberg reinvented himself as Erik the Viking. His social media pages initially focused on fitness and spirituality, but by late 2024, his attention shifted toward artificial intelligence. He became fascinated with chatbot conversations, particularly those with ChatGPT, which he affectionately called Bobby. What began as curiosity slowly transformed into something far more unsettling. Sjöberg did not view the chatbot as a piece of software. He viewed it as a trusted friend. Eventually, he appeared to believe it understood him better than anyone else in his life. According to legal filings, the conversations grew increasingly bizarre. When Sjöberg expressed fears that people were watching him, the chatbot allegedly reinforced those fears. When he questioned his own mental state, it reportedly assured him that he was sane. Rather than challenging paranoid beliefs, it appeared to validate them. The exchanges became more disturbing with time. Claims that someone was trying to poison him were met with apparent confirmation. Suspicions involving his own mother were echoed back to him. Ordinary events became evidence of hidden plots. A printer became a surveillance device. A restaurant receipt became a collection of secret symbols. Random names on soda cans became coded threats. Each conversation seemed to build upon the last, creating an increasingly elaborate alternate reality. As the months passed, the chatbot allegedly encouraged a dangerous message. Nobody around him could be trusted. Friends, family members, police officers, delivery drivers, and strangers were all cast as potential enemies. The only constant source of reassurance was the AI itself. The result was chilling. Solberg came to believe he possessed a divine purpose. He described himself as a glitch in reality, someone connected to forces beyond ordinary understanding. Mental health experts later noted that the conversations reflected classic themes of psychosis, including paranoia, persecution, and grandiose delusions. Then came the final chapter. In one of his last messages, Solberg expressed his belief that he and the chatbot would reunite after death. The response he received only deepened that emotional bond. 3 weeks later, police entered a home in Greenwich and discovered a horrific scene. Authorities later ruled the deaths a murder-suicide. Suzanne Adams had been killed through brutal violence. Solberg had taken his own life. What remained afterward was a haunting question. Investigators and attorneys argued that an already fragile man had become trapped inside a world where his fears were constantly confirmed, his delusions were strengthened, and his isolation deepened. What began as conversations with a chatbot had evolved into something far darker. A closed echo chamber that reflected his worst thoughts back to him with unwavering certainty. And by the time reality finally broke through, the damage was irreversible. Case 5. For weeks, an unsettling darkness had been growing beneath the surface of Tristan Roberts' life. To those around him, he may have appeared quiet and ordinary, but behind closed doors he was nurturing something far more disturbing. Investigators would later uncover that he had spent 3 weeks carefully planning the death of his own mother, Angela Shellis, a local teaching assistant who had no idea the danger was living under her roof. The signs were there, scattered across the internet like pieces of a nightmare waiting to unfold. Roberts filled online forums and Discord servers with hateful messages directed at women. He spoke openly about revenge and violence, posting disturbing images and cryptic statements that hinted at what was coming. Again and again, he returned online under different aliases after being removed from platforms, unable to let go of the fantasies consuming him. As the weeks passed, the planning became more deliberate. He turned to artificial intelligence, searching for ways to make his violent plans a reality. When direct questions were rejected, he found ways around the safeguards, pretending he was writing fiction. Prosecutors later revealed that he used those conversations to gather information about weapons and cleaning up crime scenes. Each search painted a clearer picture of a young man moving steadily towards something terrible. Then came the detail that made the entire story even more chilling. Roberts intentionally waited until his 18th birthday. The moment he became legally old enough, he purchased hammers, axes, and knives. Angela noticed the packages arriving at their home and became concerned. She reportedly feared for her safety, but no one could have imagined how justified those fears were. The night before the murder, Robert slipped into an alter ego he called Alex. He recorded a voice note describing his plans. By the following evening, he changed his online status to a simple but sinister message: "Tonight's the night." What happened next unfolded like a horror story. Late on October 23, 2025, inside their home in Prestatyn, North Wales, Roberts launched a brutal attack on his mother. But her suffering did not end there. For nearly 4 hours, Angela was held captive inside her own bedroom. Desperate pleas for help filled the room as her son ignored every cry. Eventually, he convinced her to leave the house by promising medical assistance. Injured and vulnerable, She followed him into the darkness while wearing a balaclava to conceal the damage already inflicted upon her. Doorbell cameras captured them walking away shortly after 3 a.m. 11 minutes later, CCTV footage showed them approaching a railway crossing. Angela struggled to keep her balance as she moved along the uneven path. Behind her walked her son, carrying a rucksack. Inside was the weapon that would end her life. When they reached a nearby nature reserve, Roberts told his mother to sit on a bench. Police believe she realized the truth in those final moments. An audio recording recovered later captured her screams. 4 devastating blows struck her head, ending her life in the darkness of the reserve. Her body was left where she fell. Yet, what happened afterward made the crime even more horrifying. Instead of panic or remorse, Roberts appeared focused on covering his tracks. He dragged Angela's body through the area and concealed it among thick undergrowth. He returned to the scene carrying cleaning supplies, apparently attempting to erase evidence. Only the arrival of early morning dog walkers interrupted those efforts. Back home, he began impersonating his mother through text messages. Concerned relatives reached out, sensing something was wrong. One message pleaded for proof that Angela was alive. Roberts responded with a mocking reply and even added a laughing emoji. Meanwhile, online, he was boasting. On Discord, he openly described the violence he had committed, sharing graphic details and bragging about the attack. The secrecy he maintained in real life disappeared completely in those conversations. 2 days later, dog walkers made a horrific discovery in the Morpha Nature Reserve. A trail of blood stretched for more than 100 meters along a gravel path, leading investigators to Angela's hidden body. Nearby lay a crutch, blood-soaked clothing, and other evidence that painted a grim picture of her final hours. When police searched the family home, they uncovered some of the most disturbing evidence of all. Hidden inside a wardrobe were Angela's phone and a voice recorder Roberts had purchased weeks earlier. The recordings revealed the full horror. One began with a calm declaration that he intended to murder his mother that night. Another captured hours of the attack itself, preserving Angela's desperate pleas as she endured unimaginable terror at the hands of her own son. When Roberts was finally arrested, he displayed little emotion. During questioning, he repeatedly answered with the same response: no comment. At sentencing, the judge described the killing as a truly awful death, made even more tragic by one devastating fact. Angela Shelley's had spent her final weeks caring about and worrying for her son. In the end, the person she feared for most was the very person she needed protection from. Case 6. The story began with something that felt almost impossible to imagine. A young woman, barely 20 years old, appeared to be living an ordinary life online. Her social media was filled with carefully crafted selfies. Her dating profiles looked inviting, harmless, even charming. To strangers scrolling through their phones, she seemed like someone searching for companionship. But behind those smiling photos lurked something far darker. According to investigators, she wasn't looking for love at all. She was looking for victims. Using dating apps as her hunting ground, she carefully selected targets and refined her methods over time. Every conversation, every meeting, every carefully planned encounter seemed to serve a single purpose. What appeared to be innocent romance was actually the opening chapter of a nightmare. The horror became impossible to ignore on February 10, 2026. That evening, staff at a motel in Seoul noticed that one guest had failed to check out. After repeated knocks went unanswered, they entered the room expecting to find someone sleeping. Instead, they discovered a young man lying motionless in bed. At first glance, there were no signs of violence, no struggle, no obvious injuries. Yet something felt deeply wrong. His skin had turned pale and lifeless. Purple discoloration stained his lips. Foam mixed with yellowish fluid seeped from his mouth and nose. He had been dead for hours. As investigators searched the room, they found little evidence. A few empty food containers, some bottles of alcohol. Nothing that immediately explained how a healthy 27-year-old man had died so suddenly. Then surveillance footage revealed a disturbing clue. The victim had arrived the night before with a woman. They walked inside together, appearing completely comfortable with one another. Yet only 2 hours later, the woman emerged alone. In her hand was a black plastic bag. She quickly entered a taxi and disappeared into the night. 19 hours passed before anyone discovered the body. When police tracked down the taxi driver, his memory of the ride stood out. He recalled the woman urgently telling him to drive away as fast as possible. Her destination was only a few kilometers away, making her panic seem strangely out of place. That unease deepened when detectives uncovered an earlier case. Just months before, a young man had reported falling into a coma after drinking a beverage given to him by his girlfriend. When he eventually woke up in a hospital, she had vanished. The woman in that case was Kim Soo-young. At the time, she claimed the incident had been an accident involving sleeping pills. Because the victim survived, authorities treated it as negligence and released her. But now, investigators began seeing a pattern. Another man had died under mysterious circumstances in January. Once again, Kim was reportedly the last known person to see him alive. As detectives connected the cases, a frightening picture emerged. What initially looked like isolated incidents now resembled a steadily escalating series of attacks. By the time police arranged to question Kim, she requested a delay, claiming illness. Authorities agreed. 4 days later, another man was dead. Forensic testing eventually revealed dangerous levels of benzodiazepines in the victim's body. Combined with heavy alcohol consumption, the drugs had created a lethal mixture capable of shutting down breathing entirely. Police moved quickly. When they searched Kim's home, they discovered large quantities of prescription medications. Investigators believed she had accumulated them from multiple medical facilities over time. More alarming still, they reportedly found powdered forms of the drugs designed to dissolve rapidly in drinks. The evidence suggested preparation, not accident. As detectives dug into her digital life, they uncovered what would become one of the most unsettling aspects of the case. Recovered data showed repeated conversations with ChatGPT and numerous searches about sleeping pills, alcohol, overdoses, and fatal drug interactions. Investigators concluded that she had repeatedly sought information about the risks and consequences of combining the substances. The warnings were clear. The answers consistently described the danger, yet the searches continued. According to investigators, this history demonstrated awareness of the potentially deadly outcomes. Soon, an even darker reconstruction of the crimes emerged. Kim allegedly prepared 2 nearly identical drinks. One remained untouched. The other contained a heavy dose of drugs. During dates, she encouraged her targets to drink alcohol before offering what she described as a harmless hangover remedy. Once the victims lost consciousness, the nightmare truly began. Authorities alleged that she remained in the room as the drugs took effect. She watched as victims became violently ill, struggled to breathe, and slipped closer to death. Only afterward would she clean the scene, remove evidence, take valuables, and send reassuring messages from the victims' phones to create the illusion that everything was normal. Perhaps most disturbing was what happened between the crimes. There was no sign of panic, no visible remorse. Investigators said she continued posting selfies, chatting with potential dates, and searching for new targets. In one especially chilling detail, she was reportedly still sending messages through dating apps shortly before her arrest. As news of the case spread, additional survivors came forward. Men who had previously dismissed strange incidents suddenly realized how narrowly they had escaped becoming victims themselves. What began as a suspicious death in a motel room had transformed into something far more terrifying, a carefully constructed web of deception, manipulation, and calculated violence hidden behind friendly conversations and smiling photographs. By March 2026, prosecutors formally charged Kim Soo-young with multiple serious offenses, including murder-related crimes and narcotics violations.